Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to see familiar faces here and then some folks that names I don't recognize. I would just be great if we could go through, I'll just name people off on the screen that I see and just say your name and where you're coming from. Are you an educator, and if so, where? Or are you a grower? If so, where? Or if you're just an interested citizen, that too. So just names and where you're coming from. So in a professional setting. So start with you, Krista. Or actually, I'll start with myself. So I'm John Bandis, and I am working at Hurricane Island as the Director of Education.
Thanks, John. I'm Krista Thorpe. I'm a Community Development Officer at Island Institute.
Okay, great. And Henry? Maybe Henry's not there yet. Leah?
From Colombia. So
Yeah.
we introduced himself earlier in the chat.
Okay.
Hi, Leah Morris. I'm a Community Development Officer at the Island Institute, particularly focused on blue economy. So aquaculture is within that very large bucket.
Okay, cool. Silas.
Hi, I'm Silas Rogers. I work at Hurricane Island as the Facilities Manager with John. Very excited to be working with him. And I live in Rockland.
Diana?
Hi, Diana Dwyman, Maine Department of Education, Life and Career Ready Specialist.
Great. Daniel?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Dan Ganoza. I'm a high school science teacher on Vinyl Haven.
Great. Welcome. Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate Klebansky. I am the Climate Corps Planner for Volunteer Maine, and I also work at Eventide Oyster Company. So I am very invested in the aquaculture industry.
Cool. Welcome. And Kate Holcomb.
Hi, I'm Kate Holcomb. I run Canopy Farms, which is an aquaponics greenhouse in Brunswick, Maine.
Okay. Sarah?
Hey everyone.
Sorry, wrong Sarah.
Suzanne.
I keep doing that. All right.
There's
Sarah Kim, and then
Maine Manager of Education at Maine Maritime Museum.
Great. Awesome. And then, all right, Sarah Hooper.
Hi, thanks. I'm Sarah Hooper. I'm the Education Specialist at Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park.
Great. And Brian?
I'm Brian Fieser. I'm the Assistant Principal at the Vinyl Haven.
Henry, we missed you before, so you just introduce yourself and like your kind of what's your professional connection to this presentation?
Hi, I'm Henry Velasquez. I'm right now in Fonza, a little town very near to Bogota, the main city of Colombia. So right now I work in some sustainability projects here in Colombia and our main island, San Andres, in the Atlantic Sea. Thank you.
Great, thanks for being here. Ryan.
Hi, I'm the PE teacher and health teacher at Vineland School.
Cool, welcome. Sam?
Hi, I'm a former high school science teacher and now nursery manager at Muir Point Oyster Company in Brunswick.
And Diana Carroll?
Hi, I'm the lead teacher at Alaho School.
Great.
Marcela. And I go by Marcela, not Diana.
Marcel. Okay, sorry, Marcel. I think it leaves. Oda just popped in. Hi, Oda.
How's it going?
Good. How are you? We're introduce our names and where we're working. I'm going to say Oda is the K-12 art teacher at Islesboro. Oh, there she is. Okay. And Anne Froning.
You're talking about just changing your title or in the chat or saying it?
Just saying it.
Oh yeah, I teach art K through 12, Islesboro Central School.
Oh, thanks. Karen Burns.
Karen shouldn't be here. She's hosting
Okay.
another Zoom link, so that might be I'm
right.
very intrigued.
Okay, Laura.
Hi, John. Laura here. I know you from a while back.
Yes.
I'm now on Frenchboro. I'm the K-8 teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. Woo.
Wow, congratulations. And Paige?
Hi, everyone. I'm an Islands Fellow located in Eastport, and I'm just interested about aquaculture and learning more. So happy to be here.
Cool. And Caitlin?
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I am the lead K-8 teacher at Monhegan Island School.
Cool. Great. It was a great blend of people is what I was hoping to have so that we can have some conversations about how to blend these ideas of aquaculture industry and education as we're trying to empower student change makers. That way, so really hopefully we'll have some good conversations around that. I'm gonna start sharing my screen and start into a presentation, and we'll move into breakout rooms, do a little work on a Jamboard. We'll come back to the larger presentation and then go through some slides on there, and then break out into breakout rooms again, but more focused on conversations between educators and folks who are interested or are working in aquaculture. So that's our scope. And then we'll end the presentation going through some documents and kind of organizers to help facilitate that work between educators, students, and growers. So that's the goal. So I'm going to share. Okay. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day and choosing this workshop. I know there's other exciting ones to look at too. So I appreciate your presence. So our big takeaways here, why we're here is, as I just said, we're really trying to think about ways that we can empower students to be leaders through their work in the classroom, but then giving them an authentic audience and authentic challenges to be creative problem solvers. And that would be involving growers and folks in the aquaculture industry. So our goals for today, our takeaway goals are to build some connections, start that work of connecting classrooms to growers, and then in a way, students to those educators. Starting the process now of trying to create these place-based learning opportunities for students and also for growers learning the power of student ingenuity. And then in the end, exploring some planning documents and standard connections, because that still is an important part of the work that educators are doing. I was wondering if there'd be someone who's willing to read this poem out loud. I think it always works better if someone reads it out loud rather than have everyone read it silently. So is there a brave person?
I can read it. I don't mind.
Great. Thanks, Oda.
Yeah. Okay. It's called The Leader by Arthur V. Kent. New poet to me. All right. The Leader. It is but a little thing to see beauty where dream abounds, and an easy thing to set sail for the shore in restful seas. And who may not be as the note of a song mid tuneful sounds? Yea, small things these. And hope is a lightsome guest when the mind is arrayed in stars, and a pleasant task it is to thank God for a granted prayer. And the scales that are builded to weigh but the sun shaft bars have hands of air. But I, even I who am speaking, would be as the steadfast pine that clings to a barren rock in the teeth of the whistling wind, for everlasting reclothing itself with a new green sign, nor look behind.
Great, thank you. And are there any things that people are willing to say that they notice in that poem, like things that stand out to you as Oda read through it and you were following along? Anyway, it could be anything that you notice in there. Like I noticed the idea, that word of reclothing itself, it really stands out to me. Something in the new green sign, something that stands out to me as a noticing. Anyone else?
The pine stood out to me, and Maine and Dirigo.
Okay. Nice. Anyone else? So you're making connections to there too. That's excellent. Anyone else? Noticing connections?
It's sort of, I feel like it's a poem that kind of needs reading through a couple times, but there's like these qualities or characteristics that are shown through the natural world, but sort of parallels with the person. So it's like qualities that the natural world already imbues or like has in it's showcased through all these different forms and sort of landscapes, and they're qualities that the person wants to imbue or to have as well. So like, for example, a steadfast pine, and the way that the pine is steadfast is because even though this pine tree is growing on like a rock with the whistling wind, and it's kind of a hostile environment, it's not really like an easy place to grow. And it talks about teeth, which is like sort of this threatening imagery, and it's clinging, like it's not comfortable, it's like holding on for dear life, and it's a barren rock, there's not a lot of like support for the root structures and everything, but even so that pine is still growing there. And that's a quality that we as people and as leaders or as community members, like to be steadfast, to be able to hold on through hard times, like that's, and to be able to even thrive in that, not just survive, like that's a really amazing quality to have. And that's something that like we could be learning from the natural world. So that's just like one example in that whole poem, I guess.
Cool. Well, it's exactly what I saw in it, why I put it there. So thank you. And it's what I see in educators who are constantly like trying to give new things and empower students in their classrooms. And it's also what I think of with anyone in the aquaculture industry, that there's a lot of obstacles and challenges that kind of like trying to blow you over, and you're all working really hard to stand back up and keep renewing yourselves. And so you're perfect role models for our students who we're trying to get to do this work. So the two questions I have for you, and then we'll jump into an idea of it on the Jamboard, is the first question is, what does leadership look like? So all of you have your ideas and your own ways of interacting with people in the world and your place in the world. So what does leadership look like to you in your world? And what does successful teaching look like? And it doesn't have to be in a classroom setting. I'm not talking about just formal education, but any time that you're seeing teaching, you're being taught, or you are teaching others, what does success look like for teachers? Okay, so now we're going to move into breakout rooms. And so I'm going to I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to put into the chat a link to a Jamboard. That's where we're going to go. And in the Jamboard, I'm going to ask to see if one person in each group is willing to share their screen, and that person then could type on the screen your stickies where you're going to put them. We just need a couple minutes for this, but I'll demonstrate how that Jamboard works. You just go over to the side and you can select a sticky note, and you can type on this anywhere. So leadership means supporting your group. It's one thing that like leadership looks like to me. And then you can post it down, and then you can just select again and type in another sticky note. And there's ways you can have different colors. So Chris is going to break us all into groups, and within each group, if someone could say, I'm willing to be the person to share the screen and type the notes, that way you can have conversations about what you're putting in, but everyone's putting it onto the same Jamboard. That's the idea. Questions?
All right, I will open the rooms and you'll just have to click join.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. It seemed like there was definitely a little snafu with getting the Jamboard to everyone, so I appreciate everyone's patience with that. I am going to share my screen with this first. And so we went where I was hoping that we would go, this idea of that leadership and successful teaching, like they kind of, it's hard to discern one from the other. That, a really good leader is listening to the group, trying to inspire the group, but making sure the group is supported all the time. That's what a really good educator is doing, is changing plans based on where student interest is, and then making sure that the fires of curiosity and inquiry and engagement are lit. And always this willingness to learn and willingness to collaborate and willingness to put kind of your own self-interest aside to make sure that the group is being supported. So awesome. Thank you very much. So our goal now is to start thinking about like how can we do that as teachers and then also leaders in this industry. And so everyone, again, is taking on this idea of leadership, but everyone is also taking on this idea of being an educator. So so back into this slideshow, and you know, these are questions that I think along the way that we need to ask as these educators and leaders. What are students learning and what are they doing with what they've learned? Are they, you know, is it for books? Is it for what our district is telling us we need to do? Or is it for really making the world a better place? Larger, global, local scale. Are they, you know, are the students on hurricane, when they leave a hurricane, is it a little bit better than it was when they got there? And what can we point to, and how did that happen, and how can we make that happen more often? And then the next step is then trying to make sure that we're getting our students asking these kinds of questions. So, you know, who's been there before them? Whose shoulders can they be standing on? What are characteristics of people who can create change? Who are good leaders? Who is inspiring and motivating and yet supportive and empathetic at the same time? So that students can really know how they can be a leader for that positive change in their community. That's ideally what we all want and what we really need right now. So in a sense, like I can kind of like a graphic organizer. This is really came to light with a group that came out to Island recently. We had students who kept saying, I don't know, when we asked them, do you know how to tie a clove hitch? Do you know how to tie a bowline? What, you know, which should you throw in first, the buoy or the weight? Things that like those students knew how to do it, and throwing in the buoy or the weight didn't matter. But their first reaction was, I don't know. And it wasn't that they didn't know, but they just didn't want to take a risk, and they didn't really trust us yet. And so like, how can we work on building that trust? And so we want trust from the students, but we also want the students to feel that we are trusting them. And so by offering an authentic audience and a real challenge combined with mentorship and role modeling, then the students are doing all of these things are in the green circle, right? They're doing it for themselves and for their own interest, in the sense of like, it's important to them. They've taken it in as that's what they're supposed to do, but they're also seeing it as helping this larger goal. Like if they do all of these things, then the team is going to make it and reach the goal in the end, or at least make some forward steps. And then they'll have confidence and resiliency. So students, I'm just having ended being in the classroom to enter this new role at Hurricane, and what my students kept always saying, especially more I was talking about climate change, was like, it's just too much. Like they're just overwhelmed by the doom and gloom. And they really need to see some rays of hope. They want to know what is positive action they can take, and you know, what are the first steps? Like, how do they do it? So aquaculture is amazing for that, right? It's built around the idea of sustainability. How can we feed a growing population in a way that's not going to harm the water, won't harm the land? Like incorporate ideas of resilience as the climate is changing, as workforces and ideas of approaches to education are changing. And then there's that part that students are really excited about, mitigation. Like how can they actively do things to make the world better? And aquaculture, right, with polyculture and things, we're showing that there's ways to actually even like measure the positive impact of growing in the water. And then all of the growers, all of the people in the industry who are figuring this stuff out are acting and showing the students how to have the courage to find the purpose and how to act. And so then the same graphic of like, what does aquaculture industry need? Like things are going well, and watching like, you know, oysters are really starting to take off. The industry is really kind of coming into its own. Mussels have been into you know, their own for a while, and scallops is like building, but it always could be better. So, you know, I would push back and saying that students, like they're really full of creative ideas, and they haven't yet had enough people tell them, no, that won't work, right? They're full of new ideas, and they can help growers see these changes in their industry and in their businesses. And even if they aren't necessarily that future labor supply, they're hands in the field of like things that you need getting done. So for instance, with shellfish restoration, you get 10 kids out there putting out the predation control nets, goes a lot faster. So here I'm going to have Silas just briefly tell us about his innovation with the star drives, and really reading his blog post on the Hurricane website is what inspired the idea I had for this workshop, was this idea of problem solving and thinking that students could do it. So Silas, can you tell us in 2 minutes?
I can. I'll have to really consolidate. So we have on Hurricane for those of you that don't know, we have about a 3.5 acre research aquaculture lease on the north end of the island, and our 2 cash crops are scallops and sugar kelp, and a different type of skinny kelp we tried one time. You can see us harvesting some on that slide. And scallop aquaculture research really started through a different research initiative altogether, but we ended up with all these baby scallops through that work with the collaborative scallop group in Spruce Head that we did that original research with. And so we said, well, we should just grow them out and do other studies with them. And so that's what we've been doing. And turns out we have a lot of them, and they are hard to manage, to keep them organized, to keep them clean. Some of you may be familiar with the techniques in which we store scallops, which are in these things called lantern nets that hang in the water, suspended from a horizontal rope below the surface. And we needed some special gear to be able to service those lantern nets and utilize that technique of growing. And there's not really anything commercially available on the small scale. This middle photo is a picture of a rig that a guy, another scallop aquaculturist, Marsden Brewer out of Stonington, has rigged on his lobster boat. It's sort of a pot hauler modified jobby. And it was just I was like, well, I can make that. I looked online. There's like big industry stuff for big commercial long line mussel aquaculture in the Mediterranean Ocean and in Japan and stuff. And that I was like, that's as big as our boat is. It's not going to work. So I just scaled it down, and I worked with our aquaculture manager, Madison, at Hurricane to develop this basically mini version that's skiff sized. And you can see the far right, that's on the kitchen table of the house that I rented last winter. And it's just me doodling and using the bandsaw. And the silver shiny thing is a shiv, a fair lead that you normally see on lobster boat pot haulers, commercial, you can buy them. So I tried some prototypes, we tried it out, and it works for now. It works pretty good. Could be better, but I think what John's trying to get me to say is it was sort of a shoot from the hip approach, but we had the flexibility to just try something new and adapt an existing idea to fit to fill a need that is not otherwise really available. So and I loved writing about it, and so I got some feedback from other aquaculturists that wanted to learn from my experiences. So that's the deal with the star wheels, and it's not my idea, but we did adapt it to fit our application, and we tried it this season, and it worked, which is a bonus.
Great bonus. Thanks, Silas. And the other part that was in my head at the time when I read Silas's blog post was that I was talking to David Perloff of the Perloff Family Foundation about getting a 3D printer and a laser cutter for Hurricane, and just thinking of the technology that students are getting more and more access to, and that the pattern making that Silas is doing there with the bandsaw and the plywood, like that's like we can do it that way, and then students could also do it with small models on the 3D printer or cutting out pieces like those gears on a laser cutter. And you don't have to have the fancy equipment, but we also have a lot of this technology in our classrooms. And then sometimes as teachers saying like, I don't know what to do with it. What's next? We did one project and I don't know what the next one is. And this might answer some of those questions. Thank you, Silas. So the idea really is to develop these learning opportunities for students. And so I'm going to quickly go through examples of work that my students did at Northport and also at Islesboro. And I just want to say it's 5 years of work. It started off small scale and they got bigger and bigger and more complex. But what's not here is the mess of there's a lot of failures, both for me as a teacher, educator, and then also the student work itself. And that's not here, right? But this is just ideas of things that students have done, and maybe it's sparking ideas before you move to your conversations about what students can do. So the first was the students in Northport were just looking at how do you deploy the seeded kelp line? Like the industry said, you do one single wrap around the horizontal line and you let it grow. And the students wanted to know, well, what would happen if you double wrapped it? Would you have more kelp? Would the kelp grow faster? Would the kelp grow smaller? What would happen? And in the end, they found there was more density of stipes, but the blades were smaller. So it was kind of a wash. But it was a really good question for the students to ask, and one for someone to check out. No one that we knew of had asked that before. Ideas of product manufacturing. This is a student trying to make a waterproof coating for a buoy out of seaweed extracts. And there's just two ways to cause the polymer of the sodium alginate. You can do it while the sodium alginate is still wet. That's immersion, or that's mixing, or you can do it with the sodium alginate has dried already, and then you dip it back into the sodium chloride to make it cross-link. And then the students testing it. And again, here we didn't have the fancy Instron for doing the pull test, but we could convert our bridge tester to measure that. So ideas of changing process. Students have time. They can look at how you make something and then say, well, what if we switch the order of things? What happens? Can we have a different end product? Product design of something dissolvable, something biodegradable. These are components that were kind of connecting a ballast bag for a CU rocket probe that Graham Hawkes had made and is in a couple of schools. And the students were combining recycled paper with kelp and then finding out that the parts we made dissolved and it weren't really working. And Graham said, okay, well then make it dissolve at a programmed rate. I want a piece of kelp paper that dissolves in 5 minutes. I want one that dissolves in 10 minutes. I want one that dissolves in 2 hours. And so students again, are really good at trying out these different ideas. And in class, you can have time that a grower might not have to say, well, let's try that recipe. Okay, that's our result. Let's try the next one. Bio-based marine waterproof coatings, right? So how can we get less plastic out into the oceans? These are those mycelium hemp-based buoys, and students looking at ways that they can use kelp products. So an end product of kelp that's not food, right? How can we use it to make a plastic coating that's biodegradable and could use up a lot of kelp? But there is still room for product design of students coming up with seasoning. They found something they really liked with popcorn that they would then have at all of the school games, and they sold it at their bake sales. Students are great at developing and advertising and spreading word of mouth about products. Students made a game, took the game's Settlers of Catan, and we modified it to be Farmers of Kelp. So it's a great teaching tool about what kelp needs and what a farmer needs. You need gear, you need a permit, you need the source tissue, you need flushing tides, and you need lots of sunshine. And the kids really got into that. So there's tons of science content, and it's a really fun game too, and a great teaching tool. And then gear alternatives. Students are really horrified at all the plastic out in the water. And that's one thing aquaculture uses a lot of plastic. So can loofah sponges, it's a gourd, it's a growing vegetable, but it has that same mesh quality as the netron or things like that we use for spat bags. Can we replace some of the nylon gear with like plant-based alternatives? These are great, like students are coming up with these kinds of questions. They're busy hands, they can help do the deployment for our spat bag recruitment in Penobscot Bay. So we have bags out. I'm having about 12 lines go out to different schools this fall. So there's a lot more spat bags than what Hurricane can get out on their own. And then local preservation and conservation. This is the idea of like more hands at work. So students are great at being out in the field, helping get data collection. And then when everything comes inside, they're doing all the sample analysis. And that work, like it empowers students and it's creating leaders who like, it started off as a project for students who were kind of not excited about school. And then they are presenting at the Fisherman's Forum. They wrote a peer-reviewed article for GMRI's findings from the field. They also were peer reviewers for other students. And honestly, like GMRI sent us extra papers because the students did like a really good job of doing that peer review. And then as a high schooler, one of those students was winning awards at the state science fair. So here's a student who wasn't really excited about school, definitely not excited about science, 3 years before, and now is in the state science fair meeting success, leading the charge. Really is this idea of that. So it's the students with the idea of innovation, but they need to have someone to work with. And so we really need to build ideas of interdisciplinary collaboration, and not even just with subjects, but like different places, like being in the industry or being in school. So there's another what Silas did a metal version of it. So if you read his blog post, he's got great writings too about learning how to weld. And so like along the way to do what he needed to do. And so this idea of building skills too, that students are going to need to have new ideas and new content and new skills, ones that we can't imagine as educators, but these are perfect opportunities for them to learn these things in a real way for a real purpose. Okay, so my next time for breakout rooms is now. And so what I'd like to do is put you into breakout rooms to start some of these ideas of conversations. And so, educators, I'm not saying like you have to like say, here's a grower, we're gonna go, tour the farm next week. And growers, I'm not saying that you need to like make that commitment to an educator, but we need to start having the conversations about what are the kinds of needs that growers have, and what are the kinds of things that maybe, having seen some of the examples that students are doing, that maybe you can start to imagine students doing for you. And then educators, what can you imagine your students doing? And I guess I would say for educators, aim a little high, because the students are, of course, always able to do more than sometimes we think, especially when they're engaged and excited. So the other part Krista is gonna put you into breakout rooms. She's gonna open up breakout rooms, and you won't necessarily be assigned a room. You're gonna choose your own room, which makes the breakout rooms work differently. So when you look at if you're on your Zoom screen, if you hover over it at the bottom, you'll see breakout room. And if you hover over that or click on that, then it'll open up a small window that lets you go to a room, and you can look and choose a room to join. And you can maybe join Silas's room and think about ways that you can or collaborate from Silas's room. Kate Holcomb is here from Canopy Farms, which is they have a recirculating aquaponics system that's in Brunswick, a really exciting aquaculture venture that's happening there. And Kate is really excited about bringing educators into the facility, and already has a science cafe series started with that. So Kate is like ready and highly tuned to the needs of educators. And then I don't know, Krista, is Bo Marsden?
Yeah, but Bo somehow got in another room, and he was like, it's a very interesting talk, but I don't think I'm in the right place. So and then he had a commitment at 1:45. So we have 3 rooms, you, Silas, and Kate.
Okay, so and then as you're in those rooms, you can choose, and you can leave a room and join another one. So you can just pop select that breakout symbol at the bottom, and then you can just hover over another room where the numbers are on the right side and join a different room. So this is like a way that you can come and go to different conversations. So I'll have a room, I can talk about things that students have done in ways I think that hurricane education can facilitate. And then there's Silas, and then also Kate. Seconds. So I know our group didn't have enough time, and I am positive that the other groups didn't have enough time either. And so I apologize for that. But again, hoping that these are the beginnings of conversations, and I'll just say the ones that I'm happy through the role of Hurricane to help facilitate, and or the ones that, you know, Hurricane doesn't need to be involved, and the ones that, you know, educators and growers can start working together on your own. I think the common theme here is like, how do you build the, like, how do you make the connection? And the thing I was thinking about in our group, and then also having talked with Kate about Holcomb, is that there really needs to be a problem first, and then reaching out to a design team, which in this case could be the students. So I'm going to finish my presentation and just show some of the resources that are available. And I'm going to go fast, just trying to be cognizant of time. So this is idea, like, how can we do all of these? These are all those big science words for the next gen science standards. Like, how do we get them to fit with aquaculture and then other disciplines as well? And it really, like, endpoint is looking at United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So, you know, 17 of them, I've highlighted the ones that seem to be the most closely connected. But the title UN SDG Connections is a link, and it will take you to the UN page that's about these. But notice there's things in there about gender equality and reducing inequalities and like good health and well-being, as well as the science. So there's like multidisciplinary approach to thinking about aquaculture. Here are all the NGSS standards for science people. So these all go to big curated pages. Science and engineering practices are here, about students are doing all this work as they're trying to create solutions. And this is just a visual of that design cycle of, you know, fail fast, fail often, and keep on going. And growers, you know, you've been doing this, the students, like, you're great role models and mentors for how to survive this design cycle, about not giving up and just keep on going. And then here's a basic idea of action steps. So starting slowly, probably having some way of getting a tour of the facility. So, you know, growers and people in the industry, you know, being willing to open your facility up either in person or with a virtual tour, and involving some kind of virtual meeting between the students so that you just get to know one another, and then finding ways to present challenges to those students, and then seeing what the students can do. So now I'm going to totally overwhelm everyone with the resources, but you have access to this folder, and so then you can see what's in there. So there's the first thing here is just helping some like things that maybe help growers find a problem, and there's an action plan here that has links to the different documents that are in the folder. So again, meeting with the students, offering that tour, and then completing a really basic needs assessment, doing a graphic organizer of a systems map, a cause and effect map, and a problem survey to say, you know, these are the problems in our system. This is where things aren't optimized and where we can look to have some, like, it'd be great to have some possible solutions to this. And then you create, which for innovation engineering is called a blue card. And that's just saying, this is the problem, being very specific about it. These are the things we've tried, boundaries, we're willing to like think about these kinds of things, and we're totally not willing to think about these kinds of things. So you're putting in place the design constraints that the design team needs. And then you're like having the conversations with the design team, which are the students. And then if we go back in here, here's the educator's side of it, which is another action plan. And again, all those things are linked to different parts. So, you know, the grower is completing a needs assessment, gives the students a blue card. And the teacher kind of like is looking at anticipating what content and skills the students might need to solve that problem, and can start generating some lesson plans around there. The students start like brainstorming solutions to the problem. You know, it was the plastic mesh that was in the aquaculture gear, and we came up with, well, it just needed to be a coarse net-like material. And someone said, well, hey, I have like makes me think of scrubby in the bathtub. And someone said, oh, well, we use loofah one. And then like all kinds of light bulbs popped off for the students. So mind map idea. And then there are some tools in here about how to develop, like how to modify a process. So the 4-question strategy and the scamper tooling. Questions for students to kind of refine their ideas, 20 questions for greater creativity, and then a yellow card. And the yellow card, again, is coming from this design innovation of saying, here's our proposed solution to the problem. And this one's pretty interesting because it says, you know, a headline, like what's the sales pitch for it? Who are they trying to convince? What's the problem they were solving? What's the benefit promise? Like, what are you as a grower going to get out of this solution? What's the proof? How are the students going to show that that benefit can really happen? What's the cost of it? And then value, like, you know, if you didn't do this, you didn't take our idea into account and try this solution, then this is what like the consequences will be. So students are really diving deep into the idea of what it means to innovate and solve problems. I'm trying to provide as much structure as possible there so that these are real solutions because you're providing real problems to them. And so everyone deserves it to be authentic and like, so knowing that it'll be messy, right? So there'll be lots of failures along the way. All of the slides I had of student work, there were like, you know, 8 things that didn't work for everyone that did. And so there's my contact information. I'm happy to facilitate any questions, any outreach, anything. This is the work that Hurricane does, and we would welcome collaborations with you on these kinds of things. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kate, from Canopy Farms for coming. Thank you, Silas, for running those rooms and having those conversations. And thank you, Krista, for running this Zoom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. And